Hey guys, I should be streaming at this point. I'm just waiting for YouTube to give me confirmation. Yes, it says I have an excellent connection, and thus we should be live. Edkin, welcome. Yeah, it says here I was on her Discord around that same time. She seemed to be pretty busy. Look, I gather she was. The Discord chat was very busy. However, as I said, I didn't feel like a good fit. Um, the level that I was coming at, actually, I was getting challenged by people who clearly had never heard of the things I was talking about. And that frustrates me because I know the sources so well. And I know sources that they're not even aware of. So, um, and yes, and you're saying, yeah, and yes, the level of discourse in there is very low compared to academic circles, but still way more moderate and leveled. No, I agree. I mean, there are certainly, it's good to have a community, but I honestly, when I'm being challenged by people who obviously know far less than I do, and I don't mean 5% less. And then also when I'm trying to raise an issue of doctrine and people are just throwing Quran verses at me, it's kind of a waste, because I'm way beyond Quran verses at this point, and there's far more to be discussed, to be discovered in terms of doctrine. But hello everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining me in the chat. And thank you for watching the show. I'm really glad to have you guys here, and it's great to connect with my audience again. And yeah, so hopefully I've caught up with the chat at this point. So again, the topic of today's discussion is to talk about the Islamic Jihad or the Islamic Crusades and how the Christian Crusades were a response to 462 years of Islamic Jihad, Islamic provocation, and of course also Islamic slavery. Again, a topic I will touch on today, and I will do a quick recap of yesterday's discussion. But do remember that while Muslims may say otherwise, Islam has never renounced slavery, it has never apologized for its slavery, and Islam has been the biggest slaver in the history of mankind. So this is an issue that needs to be challenged, needs to be discussed, and the facts and the history need to be put forward. Veronica, you're saying the challenge is to bring more people to a better level of knowledge about Islamic doctrine. Yes, that is true. Unfortunately, I think that we've been taught to view the Quran as the ultimate source of Islamic understanding. The Quran is vague, the Quran is contradictory, the Quran is 20% garbage, according to honest discussion by academic researchers in the West, that 20% of its text is just gobbledygook. Now, you know that for every verse that you cite, they will cite an opposite and contradictory verse, which obviously has to be dealt with through abrogation. So these little issues lead to some serious problems. But the Quran is like the ABC of Islam. It's like my first reader. It's like see Mark run. Mark runs fast. See Kathy run. Kathy runs off. That's the Quran compared to not the tafsir, not the other commentaries, but the actual Sharia and the Fiqh, right? And the authoritative final commentaries, which became the final doctrine. You have doctrine that is variable, and you have doctrine that is confirmed by all of the scholars. That is the consensus of all the scholars. And this is where the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah, and they always leave out the Sirah for some reason, because it's embarrassing to them, highly embarrassing. These have been combined and coalesced and finally distilled into the Sharia and into the Fiqh. And then, of course, there's another portion of Islam that is completely ignored. They don't want you looking at it because it's not for the lay Muslim. It's not even for the higher level of the ulama, the imams. This, as I discussed yesterday briefly, this is the haqiqah. This is the spiritual side of Islam, but it's not spiritual as we know it. It's actually the occult side of Islam, right? The mystical side. Generally, it's called light mysticism. But again, that's a discussion for another day. So yeah, more than 1 billion slaves. Yes. Well, I'm not sure how many, but it's a lot. I have given a couple of shows on it. If you search for them, they should still be on YouTube. My friend's channel was taken down. His secondary channel may still be up. But yeah, I've actually spoken about this at length, so I can actually do a show on slavery. So KL, godless Marxism. Lloyd, did you say Islam is the biggest slavery ideology? Um, Over time, well, Marxism is what, 150 years old? Now, you can go back to the atheist-inspired, violent, genocidal, atheist-inspired doctrines, going back to the French Revolution or the French Enlightenment era, where atheism was actually the basis of that violence, right? And so you're going back 200 years, 250 years, but Islam goes back 1400 years. So if you look at the amount of slaves that were taken by Islam, it over 1400 years, of course, they've had a head start. So yeah, they're the number one all-time slavers. The Quran calls itself Mubin. Yeah. Well, Muhammad is Amin, right? Because he is reliable, he's trustworthy, and like, sure, the Quran, yeah, the Quran says the Quran is pure. The Quran says the Quran is perfect. Awesome, awesome. And I'm the handsomest man in the world because I said so. Sure, yeah. Um, so yeah, and back to Christus. Hi there. Let's see. Hello, everyone. I've only had time to watch half of the first part, but I'll tag along in this live stream. Hi, Nicholas. Well, good to see you. And Veronica, is there an official set of books, writings, which is the Sharia or what belongs to Sharia, and also a point of discussion? Okay, now I've linked multiple times in the past to two volumes. One is the Reliance of the Traveler, and the other is the Hedaya. Now, the Sharia is not just one book. In the past, there were thousands of books. They basically are commentaries on principles and morals and legislation, law, extracted from the Quran, extracted from the Hadith, and extracted from the Sirah. Now, these laws and principles have been codified into what's called the Sharia. Now, remember, there were the four main schools. We'll restrict ourselves to those. So these are the four main schools of jurisprudence. And Muslims will lie to you up and down whole day about them. But now let's not get too confused by their protestations, because it's not true. No. So the four main schools they share three-quarters, four-fifths of their doctrine is identical, because these are the established doctrines of Islam shared across all of the scholars. The rest are variables. They're not separate religions, remember, because they're supposed to be the perfect religion. There's unity, but even Muhammad's own companions had slight differences in their application of Islam, right? So what happened is each of these scholars kind of followed one of the different companions of Muhammad. So for instance, one difference would be I think in the Maliki school and versus the others, like some of them, they pray with their hands up and others pray with their hands down. Does this invalidate Islam? No, it's just a variation. It's a minor variation. Echter kafir, een weg to Jesus Christus. An interesting fact is that Quranic Muslims are considered as disbelievers. Yes, they are considered as hypocrites, and of course, they're guilty of ridda, blasphemy, right? Well, they're not Muslims then, right? They are. There's a word for it, murtad. So, only four. Well, Adam Leuchter. Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, I've spread the word. Um, an interesting fact is that, and let's see, 14 million slaves were taken on the eastbound slave trade from Africa and arrived in Arabia. I've got numbers that show between 60 and 80 million, right? But 9 out of 10 slaves taken died during transport. But not only that, so don't forget, there are no blacks in Arabia. Very, very few. Okay, there are no blacks in Arabia because those slaves were castrated. They were not allowed to have children, and they had children. The children were either enslaved or killed. Now, if you go to America, there are something like 33 million blacks there today, right? Out of roughly 15% of the population is black because the blacks could have families. You go to Arabia, there are no blacks because the blacks, slaves, were not allowed to breed. And ultimately, all of them effectively died out. So that's very, very different. Yeshua is Yahweh. I thought they were misguided. So yes, I know that. Yeah. Okay. So let me get to, uh, let's see what I need to get to here. So let me bring up OneNote. Okay. So there was a question. Oh, wrong one. So there was a question that someone asked me about the Sharia. Now, on that point, the Reliance of the Traveler is an excellent Sharia manual. Now, look, Muslims are going to give you grief because they're going to say, they always ask this question that's so lame. Do you know what Sharia is? Well, they can answer it whenever I ask them. But they'll constantly ask that same question. Now, the Sharia is effectively the distillation of the laws, the morals, the timeless principles taken from the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sharia, right? And the Sirah. The Fiqh is the application of man's thinking and also looking at the traditions of Muhammad and applying that to situations in life, right? So that is the application, the exegesis of the laws of the Sharia and the principles and the morals found in the Sharia, and then applying that to life. So that's the difference between the Fiqh. However, Muslims do use these interchangeably. Now, the Reliance of the Traveler, the Umdat al-Salik, is a fantastic manual because it's a single volume. The Hedaya is something like 2,652 pages, if I recall. It's 4 volumes. It sits like this on a desk. It's huge. Whereas the Reliance of the Traveler is a single volume and it's a summary of all of the best fiqh from across all the schools. Let's call it sacred law because that combines Sharia and fiqh, right? It is the sacred law and it's a detailed book and it gives you hints on every. You can find a little bit of everything in there. You'll find the ijma, the consensus of the scholars in there. And it'll also give you references to which scholar to go and research on a given topic, who is the expert, and it'll give you references to which books to go and look at. So that will tell you where to go to find the different rulings. So the Sharia is split across numerous different volumes. Within each school, there would be experts and they would all pool their opinions, and ultimately a book would be written that ultimately became the consensus manual on that topic, for instance, on marriage or divorce and so on. Or there'd be one on jihad. Like certain scholars have cornered the market on a given subject. Like jihad is Ibn Taymiyyah's territory. He's the expert on that. And oddly enough, Ibn Qayyim, who's a contemporary and a student of his, obviously then wrote further on that topic, further elucidated that because they knew each other, and he obviously learned at the feet of Ibn Taymiyyah. So he devised the whole idea of 14 different kinds of jihad. The primary jihad, of course, is jihad of the sword or violence. So yeah, so Sharia, yeah, it is Islamic law, but really there's two divisions. There's the Sharia and the Hakika. All of the ulama, the basic ulama that we are aware of, sit on the legal side. The Sharia is the legal side, right? This is the administration of mankind. Now, don't forget, Allah is too weak, sorry, Muslims, to come to earth. He's unable to. He can do everything and anything. He's unlimited, but he can't come to earth. Okay, sure. Now, on the other hand, you've got the mystical side, the occult side. And this is the domain of the Sufis. This is the domain of the upper level, the real elite within Islam are the Sufis. Hey there, Stephen Gilchrist. Hello there from London. Yeah. And hi from Warsaw, Poland. So, yeah. So let me quickly go to this. So let me go back just to cover a little bit. I hope this has been an interesting and helpful. Hello, Steffi. How are you doing? I hope this has been a helpful and interesting summary as we've begun here, right? So within the document that I've linked, you can go to the OneNote database. It'll load in your browser. It is searchable and it covers a lot of different stuff, not just my notes on the Crusades. But this that you see here is what's important. This summary is very important, right? This is where you can get the gist of it. Now, within the document that I've given you, you will find other pages as well that highlight a lot of other important detail as well. So I guess there's going to be more than 2 episodes in this. This is the wall of the Vatican. This is what they built because they were attacked by Islam, right? This is in Rome. They were in Rome, right? Now, and I've got various links that I included, and of course got the video that I played yesterday. And I discussed about the importance of the date September the 11th, because that's when Islam was supreme in Europe, and on September the 12th, they were defeated. Right, just some interesting trivia, something I discovered today. Trinitatem, Latin, has given us one of the chief words we use to describe to whom we pray, the Trinity. So the Latin source for this word is Trinitatem, the term for the number 3. So for the first 2 centuries of the Christian church, Trinity as a term describing God was unknown to the Christian world. There was the concept of the 3 in 1, the unity of the Godhead. However, there wasn't a word for it. So this term was coined by Tertullian, and he wrote in the early part of the 3rd century. Just something I came across today. Thought that may be interesting. Now, to get back to where we are here, Islamic slavery. So between the 15th and the 18th centuries, right, an approximate 5 million white Europeans were abducted and enslaved in the name of jihad, taken to Africa, taken to the Middle East. Jestem spóźniona, witaj. What does that mean? Spóźniona. Spóźniona. Okay, well, you have to translate, or I'll translate that later. So, how many were kidnapped during the Arab slave raids in Europe between the 8th and the 11th centuries is unknown. Okay, now again, as I've said, roughly 300 to maybe 500,000 blacks were taken to North America, which includes the US and Canada. 14.5 million blacks were taken to South America. You don't hear a peep about that. And 5 to, 20 times that number were taken from Europe to Africa and the Middle East as slaves. This is not discussed. Understand? Because it's very simple. They want to saddle you with guilt. Then they want to obviously deny their own guilt, their own criminality. So, okay, now, the largest Islamic army to ever invade Europe, which was something like 225,000 jihadis. The entire army was about 300,000, but the fighting men were about 225,000. In 1683, they came to conquer Vienna and then Rome, but they failed. They were stopped by an army led by the Polish king Jan III Sobieski. Now, as the Ottoman Empire was beginning its slow retreat from Eastern Europe, the Muslim slavers of the so-called Barbary states of North Africa wreaked havoc all along the coasts of Europe, reaching as far as Iceland. People living within 100 kilometers of the coastline were under threat, under severe threat. And the fact that they were destroying shipping, the fact that they were plundering shipping, meant that Europe ran out of resources. It wasn't able to trade with North Africa. Trade fell, as you saw in the video that I played yesterday, which is in this document, fell by, I don't know, 90%, which means that Europe became poor. Islam is the cause of the Dark Ages. Islam is the cause of the actual voyages of discovery around the Horn of Africa to the spice route to India, because they had to choose. The land routes were no longer available to them. So now, also, so yeah, there's lots of stories we could tell, but I won't go there now. This actually was in the notes. We discussed this yesterday. So the United States of America's first war, which it fought before it could even elect its first president, was against Islamic slavers. So America's first war was against slavery by Islamic slavers. Ah, you're late, Shvuzniona. It's late. Okay, yes. So when Thomas Jefferson and John Adams asked Barbary ambassador why his countrymen were enslaving American sailors, the ambassador answered that it was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Quran, that it was their right and duty to make war upon non-Muslims wherever they could be found and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners. Now, modern Muslims will tell you that this man is obviously an enemy of Islam, and modern Muslims will either be horribly ignorant or just plain out lying to you. So, and honestly, it's embarrassing to them to admit the truth. These are some various books on the subject, right? So you've got Brian Kilmeade, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, the forgotten war that changed American history. You've got Jefferson's War, America's first war on terror from 1801 to 1805 by Joseph Whelan, and To the Shores of Tripoli, the birth of the US Navy and the Marines. So the US, as you know, was paying 20% of their annual income to these slavers to be left alone. But eventually they had to stand up and do something. So what we saw in the earlier video was that what we today call the West is merely what remains. We are the 25% that remains of what was Christendom. Islam has taken 70 to 75% of what was Christendom, Christian lands, was called Christendom in the past. We are what remains. We are the last bastion, the last holdout, the survivors, the remnant of what was Christian land. Understand? And the Pope seems to want to give up very easily without a fight, you know. And politicians seem to just want to roll over and play dead. We are what remains of what was the Christian culture. Imagine this culture was still as large as it was. Northern Africa would be highly developed, wouldn't be a third world mess. And I know, I come from the third world, right? And yeah, so we are the westernmost remnant of what was a much more extensive civilization that Islam permanently swallowed. I'm just going to go to the comments. Zanju Balin is another example of black slavery and subsequent murder of 500,000 to 2.5 million in Basra between 869 and 883. Such a peaceful religion. Yes, that is true. That is correct. I may reference that in these notes. Otherwise, I do so in my talk on slavery. I've got extensive notes on Islamic slavery, on the Islamic slave trade, and I've done shows on that in the past on other channels. Something I could do. Marek, a conspiracy lasting for centuries, a conspiracy of silence. We've been too tolerant. Look, coming from the third world, it's very strange. Half my family, even in Africa, is white, right? So I'm black, but half my family's mixed. So it's very interesting when I see the world from two perspectives simultaneously, from a third world African perspective as well as a first world European perspective. And it's Western Europeans are too tolerant, that you have too much faith in other cultures that have different moral systems, that have different ways of seeing the world, of viewing the world, which are not as tolerant as yours. If you tolerate them, and allow them to do everything they want to do, eventually you will find yourself on the nasty end of severe intolerance, because these are not tolerant cultures. You are simply viewed as soft, as weak, and deserving of domination because of your weakness in not stopping their obvious efforts to subjugate you. Um, Stephen Gilchrist, don't you think that it's a little hypocritical of America to fight against Islamic enslavers when they themselves, Americans, owned slaves centuries before? There was no culture on earth that did not own slaves or were not enslaved. Now, don't forget, America freed the slaves. Christian nations freed the slaves. That includes Britain bankrupted itself to free the slave. Britain only paid off the debt that they incurred during the emancipation of the slaves. So don't forget, Britain started the process where they said, this is immoral. Slavery is immoral. America went to war. 750,000 Americans died to free 250,000 slaves. Don't forget, 3 times the Americans died ultimately to free slaves, right? So Americans went to war. The North went to war to stop slavery, right? And the Brits bankrupted their treasury. They only paid off their debt, I think, in 2010. So Britain only paid off its debt that it incurred in the process of freeing the slaves in 2010. Understand? So people refuse to understand that white culture is a moral culture. No culture is perfect, but some religions are evil. Understand that. Inherently evil. They will never change. They cannot change. Slavery is not abolished in Islam. Muslims can tell you what they like. It's in the Sharia. I can go through hundreds of pages of discussion from the Hedaya. The Hedaya is a very detailed manual on slavery law in Islam. Okay? So I hope that answers the question. I don't want to get too carried away there, but Britain paid off the debt a few years ago. Yeah, I think it was 2010. So it's not that long ago that they paid off that debt. And American slavery was purely based on individuals' own decision, but Islamic slavery is based on their religion. Exactly. Adam Leuchter, Europa lost his identity. And yes, and also you've forgotten how to say no. Sharia cannot be abolished. No, Sharia is the ultimate fruit of Islam. Sharia is Islam. Yeah, it would collapse. So anyway, so centuries of non-stop jihad and terror saw 3/4 of the post-Roman Christian world become, oh wow, thank you very much. Oh my gosh, I just got, thank you very much. I do appreciate the support. Thank you. Yeah, so now 3/4 of the post-Roman Christian world became Islamic, leaving the remaining quarter, which is Europe. 1/4 of Christendom is left. Are you willing to give it up? Do you want to be swallowed by the third world? Do you want to become the third world? Do you want to become an Islamic caliphate? And I hope the answer to that is no. And hopefully I can provide all of the reasons why you should say no very loudly and very enthusiastically. So for this reason, a tiny Europe's self-identity did not historically revolve around ethnicity or language. The small corner of the Eurasian landmass, Europe, still houses dozens of widely divergent cultures, while much larger landmasses are homogeneous. So Europe values diversity. Understand, they allow diversity of thought, diversity of culture, right? So Europe's identity evolved from a common religion. It was the last and most formidable bastion of Christendom not to be conquered by Islam. And these interesting words, this is a very interesting man, a very good scholar, someone I quite admire because he's a very, very good scholar, Raymond Ibrahim, and this is from his book, Sword and Scimitar. Now, I hope one day I get the chance to speak with him. So let's have a look. This is Eurasia, and this is Europe that's highlighted, okay? Now, Europe is very small. It's a tiny fraction of what was once an entirely Christian area. So in 1993, Samuel Huntington said in his book, In the Clash of Civilizations, that Islam has bloody borders. And he said, in Eurasia, the great historic fault lines between civilizations are once more aflame. This is particularly true along the boundaries of the crescent-shaped Islamic bloc of nations, from the bulge of Africa to Central Asia. Violence also occurs between Muslims on the one hand and Orthodox Serbs in the Balkans, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, Buddhists in Burma, and Catholics in the Philippines. Islam has bloody borders. So historian Bernard Lewis wrote, for almost 1,000 years, from the Moorish landing in Spain in 711 to the second Turkish siege of Vienna in 1683, Europe was under constant threat from Islam. All but the easternmost provinces of the Islamic realm had been taken from Christian rulers. North Africa, Egypt, Syria, even Persian-ruled Iraq had been Christian countries in which Christianity was older and more deeply rooted than in most of Europe. Of the 7 letters that the Apostle Paul sent, 6 of those places he sent those letters to are now Islamic. Um, I'd seen with my own eyes in case I worked there. Yes, I have. Yes, slavery still very much does exist in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So tell you what. So let me switch gears here and move over to some discussion again from Islamic sources. Right. So I'm going to bring up my Islamic sources, and I realize I need to share that part of the screen. So I'm going to just capture the whole screen. Okay. So you should now be seeing the entire screen. So now, in the Muslim community, we've covered this, right? I've covered this discussion. So let's continue with this. Now, jihad, the simple definition now. Ask any Muslim to go to the Sharia. He cannot. He's not allowed to. He will not do it. He absolutely will refuse. He will dance and dance and dance. But ask him to show you the Shari definition, the legal definition of jihad. Okay, not the colloquial definition, but the ultimate definition from the Sharia. And jihad always means to make war against non-Muslims, and it is etymologically derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare to establish Islam. Right now, this portion in gray is not in the original Arabic. The translator added this to try to whitewash what this is. It's a joke. This is the story of the lesser jihad and the greater jihad. Unfortunately, that is based on and Muslims love to tell you, but that's a weak hadith. Well, this in fact is a fabricated hadith. So, but yet they love this fabricated hadith. Now, notice though that you can go through all of these notes that state that the idea of the lesser jihad is a joke. It's not accepted. It's not part of doctrine. It's got no basis anywhere. And for instance, it says here, whoever dies but neither fought in Allah's cause nor sincerely considered fighting, he will die a death of jahiliyyah or jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic era of ignorance. And that's in Sahih Hadith Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So a Muslim who does not fight or will not fight is not equal to a Muslim who is willing to die or kill in the name of Allah and in the way of Allah, which is jihad. Slavery still exists in those countries, Malik. Yes, it still exists. Now, I've been to Saudi Arabia many times. So now let's have a look. This is Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, and he's a Sheikh ul-Islam of the 28 major, most influential, most senior scholars in Islam. He happens to be one of them, and he's the expert. He's regarded as the preeminent scholar on the subject of jihad. Got some fascinating books, which on my channel you'll find I discuss some of his work. There is a hadith related by a group of people which states that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said after the Battle of Tabuk, we have returned from the Jihad Asgar, the lesser jihad, to the Jihad Akbar, the greater jihad. This hadith has no source. Nobody whomsoever in the field of Islamic knowledge, that's the ulama, the scholars, has narrated it. Jihad against the disbelievers is the most noble of actions, and moreover, it is the most important action for the sake of mankind. Understand? So they quote you a weak hadith when they talk about, the inner jihad, the lesser nonsense, right? I guess you could, yeah, lying, intimidation, financial support, and so on. Yes, there is that connotation, certainly, but it's still jihad. And don't forget, it simply falls into azima and rukhsa. All those other forms of jihad are rukhsa. Remember, you got azima, which is strict application of the Sharia, strict following of Islam exactly as it is intended by Allah. Whereas rukhsa is all the rest, where you don't conform fully. On the point of azima and rukhsa, because there's no extremism, there's just azima, and there's no moderation, there's rukhsa. Moderate just means I'm moderate today. I could be azima tomorrow. Understand? It's just a role that you play. And also, Allah allows for this variation, the differences between the 4 schools called ikhtilaf. Yasir Qadi actually mentions this in the talk. There's this famous talk and so on. But anyway, ikhtilaf is the differences between the 4 schools. Now, what happens is Allah allows for variation within worship. That's why there are 4 separate schools with 4 slightly different ways. They all agree on certain solid doctrine, which is the doctrine that is agreed upon. This is the unbreakable shared doctrine. And then there's like the 20% that are differences between them. These differences do not break the doctrine. They do not change Islam in any way. They do not factor into the meaning of the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah. They don't affect the Sharia whatsoever. They simply, like I said, difference between do you pray with your hands up or pray with your hands down? Big deal. But It also specifies that some people are weak. Some people are unable. Some people don't have the mental faculties. Some people don't have the physical ability. Therefore, Allah gives them dispensation to not follow strictly because they are too weak. But those who can must. And that is the difference. That is called ikhtilaf. So, difference. So, let's see, there's some questions here. Azima, following to the letter and split. Rukhsa, license, permit. Yes, there's multiple words for it, but yes, correct. Thank you. Yeah, do you have any questions, guys, so far? So now let's continue. Oh, Stephen Gilchrist, have you read the hadith where Allah says, any Muslim who appears on Judgment Day without the strikes of jihad will appear before Allah with a deficiency? Yes, correct, because a Muslim who has not fought in jihad is not equal to one who has. Remember, the difference between one who has died in jihad and one who has died without going to jihad is the difference between 100 times from earth to heaven. Understand? Only then are you a true Muslim. Yes, I would say that that's fair enough. Now, jihad is Quranic. It is scriptural. Now, from the Sharia, actually, let me go over to this side. Let me just bring this up again. So in the Sharia, it says, this is in the Reliance, the scriptural basis for jihad prior to scholarly consensus, which is defined in section B7, are Quranic verses. Fighting is prescribed for you, Quran 2:216. So the Sharia bluntly says, this is the meaning of this verse. 2, slay them wherever you find them, Quran 4:89, and 3, fight the idolaters utterly, Quran 9:36. Stephen Gilchrist, yes, it is madness, but this is the truth of Islam. Now, understand, people can say, but we're not doing this today. Well, yeah, you might do it in a week. And don't forget, ISIS did this, right? The Taliban did this because they tried to establish the caliphate and follow Islam according to Azima, to do it strictly, faithfully. So the laws remain on the books for eternity. They cannot be changed. So understand, so maybe not today, but who knows, when they have enough power, they will. And at the end times, only then will Sharia be enforced strictly. So they're working towards this. Dragona, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And thank you everyone for the support. I mean, it's just really nice to have the comments, the interaction, and the positive words and things. Thank you very much. I'm glad this helps you. Please learn from this. If you have questions, ask. And I'm always available if anyone wants to chat to me. I actually do Skype with various people. I have chats with people, and I teach and I provide resources and education. So now, and they also mention, and such hadiths as the one related by Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet said, I've been commanded to fight people until they testify that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they have saved their blood and possessions from me. And if they haven't said it, well, then your blood and your possessions are not safe from the Muslims. That's why the ambassador from Barbary said, well, they are instructed to take slaves, to take things. Remember, they were plundering and taking. Stephen Gilchrist, they're doing it in London as you are streaming. Sadly, yes. But those are things we'll get to in more depth. Now, details concerning jihad are found in the accounts of the military expeditions of the Prophet. Now, the biographies of Muhammad, the Sirah, originally referred to his actions of war. Right. Now we call them the biographies, but really they are the records of his warfare. Right. And of course, everything he does is the example for all Muslims. Jagana, thank you for your work and all effort. You explained very well. Thank you very much. You'd be amazed how many hours I spend reading this stuff and cross-referencing, double-checking with other books. It is, yeah, Britain could be great. People lack the will. You must understand it's a matter of political will. It's a matter of information. If the public knew this, if this all became public and everyone knew this, there would be an outcry. Seriously, there would be an outcry, such a massive outcry. But don't forget, 95% of the jihad is invisible, right? It's through finance, it's through manipulation, and so on. So yeah, but information. So the jihad is obligatory upon Muslims. Jihad is a communal obligation. A communal obligation, this is fard kifaya. Fard al-ain is a personal obligation, also known as a universal. Yeah, both outcry or outrage. Yeah, there would be. I mean, would you want this in your country? No, right? People say, get this out of my country. Do something about this. And I mean, I could go into the meaning of the word deen. If you go to the OneDrive link that I've given you guys, right, for the OneNote database that I'm using, you'll read through the word deen. There's a page on deen. Read through it. You'll see the deen. Islam is a deen. It is not a religion. It's a political system. It's a system of control and domination. It says so bluntly in their own definition. Understand? So I don't know why we don't take them at their word. Stephen Gilchrist says the government are in bed with the jihadis. They know what's going on. I'm sure there is some degree of complicity, yes. Um, but yeah, so jihad is obligatory. Now you have fard al-ain, which is personal obligation or universal obligation, like the 5 daily prayers, which don't appear in the Quran but do appear in a hadith, which proves that hadith do abrogate the Quran. Now, communal obligation is a small minority, that famous small minority must always perform this action, or the crime of non-performance falls upon the entire ummah. They are all guilty of sin and will all be facing hell for this. Now, because many of the Muslims, basically the lay Muslims, most Muslims are following rukhsa, right? The ulama take on the responsibility of applying Islam fully, azima, right? Applying it strictly. So they are doing this service to Allah on behalf of the Muslims. Therefore, they have a preeminent role over the lay Muslims. Irkan said, although some clever imams would arise and reinterpret this fard al-kifaya as fard al-ain, making it even messier. Well, the thing is, jihad does become fard al-ain. It does become a personal obligation under given circumstances. If you read the Reliance, they'll explain it, right? They'll tell you, at this point, this communal obligation becomes an obligation upon every man and woman, and even children of a certain age. So it's not that they're actually following the law. In every case, you can find they are following the law. It's written in the Sharia. They're following it. They're not making it up. They are being truthful. It's just that we need to be aware that these laws exist. So when enough people perform it to successfully accomplish it, it is no longer obligatory upon others. So the others can chill while the others go kill. Understand? So, and he who provides the equipment for a soldier in jihad has himself performed jihad. Right? Now, those are the believers who are unhurt but sit behind are not equal to those who fight with their property and their lives. Allah prefers those who fight with their property and their lives a whole degree above those who sit behind. Understand? And Allah means that. So if none of those concerned perform jihad, and it does not happen, then everyone who is aware that it's obligatory is guilty of sin. In the Hedaya, they're more explicit, because also in the Reliance, understand that when people translate these Islamic books, they often whitewash. Even the academic sources, like the Encyclopedia of Islam, is slightly whitewashed. Not everything is necessarily accurately translated. Many apologists for Islam are academics, and they will try to alter things to their favor. Once you start reading through 3 or 4 different sources, you start to get this happy middle ground. You can start to see where some guy's been fudging the facts a little bit, leaving things out, putting things in, sweetening things, adding a little bit of honey. Understand? Only once you read through multiple sources will you start to find the truth. So the Hedaya says it is a crime, not a sin, a crime, and you are guilty in Allah's eyes. So jihad was a communal obligation, and there are 2 possible states, and I covered this, right? When you're in your own country, jihad's a communal obligation, right? And it has to be done once to twice a year. Remove jihad and slavery, and Islam would become a minority religion like Judaism in less than a decade. Yes, it would. Am I right in saying that the nation of Pakistan was formed as a result of failed plot to Arabize India? Islam is Arab imperialism, because if you read the sources, like you read al-Buti, for instance, his Fiqh Sunnah, they'll tell you very bluntly that Arabic and Arabic customs have to be imposed everywhere, because this is what's acceptable to Allah. Arabic is supposed to be the one magical language that is the only language that that can explain Islam perfectly. No other language on earth is capable of providing the kind of nuance that blah 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 whatever. Yeah, Erkan is correct. Yeah, in Islam, sin equals crime. But yeah, so jihad is personally obligatory for everyone able to perform it, male or female. And there you go. Jihad has just become fard al-ain. So who is obliged to fight? Those called upon to perform jihad when it's a communal obligation are every able-bodied man who has reached puberty and is sane. He's not a radical. He's not extreme. He's not someone with a loose marble or 3 or 500. Sane. You are required to be sane and rational when you go on jihad. When you run onto London Bridge and stab people, when you drive a bus over people, you are required to be sane when you do so. You have to rationally make the decision. And here's another very important point. guys, I think this is probably going to turn into like 3 or 4 or 5 episodes because there's a lot to discuss. And thank you for the questions. Stephen, ridiculous, isn't it? The Almighty God in Islam only understands Arabic. Yeah, exactly. Prayers are only accepted. Now, you can do the Shahada in another language and they'll take it. But prayer is only really acceptable. It's only, well, to Allah, it's only acceptable and only viable and worthwhile in Arabic. I mean, there's lots of interesting discussions. The thing is, again, Veronica asked earlier, the Sharia is split over so many different books, so many different commentaries. You're not going to find everything in one place. No one Sharia manual covers everything. So you need multiples. I generally work with the Reliance and I work with the Hedaya because they cover just about everything that I need to cover. If I need something else, I'll go look it up in a different book. But generally speaking, those two are definitive. The Hedaya is still in use today in the Pakistani legal system, for instance. The courts still use it today. Now, there are 4 books that they use, but the Hedaya is their main manual, so understand. Muslims can't pray in their native languages? No. No, it's not as valid. It's not accepted by Allah. So if you're in the mosque and praying, do it in Arabic, or Allah doesn't accept it. I look forward to seeing these upcoming shows. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I spend hours reading this stuff. You'd be amazed how many hours I spend on this. Now, yeah, so if there's any questions, please ask, and I'm happy to discuss. I think, okay. So now notice, they'll say here, it is offensive to conduct a military expedition against hostile non-Muslims without the caliph's permission. So in other words, don't do it, okay? Don't do it without the caliph's permission. Although, if there is no caliph, well, do it anyway. Okay, now notice Muslims will happily tell you, and I can prove to you by showing you, I have the evidence is easy for me to provide. Muslims will say, well, in Islamic law, of warfare, it says don't kill women and children. And yes, it does say that. It says don't kill the women and children unless you have to, in which case it's okay, kill them. It actually says that if, you see, because, and also if you do kill them, it says, if you do, it's okay because they're not Muslims. It literally says that. Don't kill them, but if you do kill them, it's okay because they're not Muslims. And there is no punishment for you because you've committed no sin because they weren't Muslims. There was not, if they were Muslims, they would be protected from Muslims and from Allah, but because they're not protected. And if there were punishment, this would prevent Muslims from going out and killing people. And this punishment would be an inhibition on the jihad. So therefore, there must be no punishment for Muslims who murder women and children because you don't want them afraid to go and act in jihad. It's insanity. Every single rule in Islam has a negative, has an opposite, can be. There's not a single law in the Sharia that cannot be broken. Not one. Every single tenet, principle, concept, law, rule, promise, oath in Islam can be broken. None are sacred. None. So knowledge is power and the best defense. Ignorance is death. Yes, and we are unfortunately, I'm frustrated by look, I'm not a missionary, right? I felt a calling to do this. I felt for years I had to do this. I had to speak up. But I lived in the Middle East. I could not do this. I did it anonymously for some long time, for years, but now I can do it openly. And I have a problem with academics and with Christian apologists who focus so much on the Quran and the Hadith and never look beyond it, because those sources are what Muslims are limited to, lay Muslims. And really, this is like looking upwards and seeing the bottom. What you need to do is get to the point of the scholars and look down, and that's what I do. It's like, this is what we all need to do. Riba isn't sacred either. Riba, just remind me. Riba. Oh, good grief! You're talking about blaspheming. No, not blaspheming. Yes. Good grief, man. Riba is when you slander. My bad. Slander. It's allowed if necessary. Everything is allowed if necessary. Remember, under Rukhsa, you have 7 or 9 different kinds of lying. Remember, in the Reliance, you'll come across a section called permissible lying. I think it's section R7.2, and you'll find this section called permissible lying. Now, permissible is a legal term in Islam. In other words, it is not compulsory, it is not obligatory, but it is allowed. And it is obligatory, though. Remember, like I said, in everything in Islam, there's an opposite, right? Or they'll negate everything they say. So it is obligatory if the aim is obligatory. If the aim within Islam is obligatory, and of course expanding Islam is obligatory, then it is obligatory to lie. It is compulsory for a Muslim to lie to you. This is written in the Sharia. I didn't write it, but it's there in the books. So yeah, look, there's Taqiyya, Kitman, Muruna, Tesir, Darura, and there's a couple of others, right? They're slightly different. They're all very much similar. Taqiyya has multiple uses. They'll say, well, it's only to save your life. No, it's not. It's tactical deceit for the purposes of spreading Islam. These words have more than one meaning. And of course, they'll say Taqiyya is a Shia concept. Don't be fooled. Taqiyya is not a Shia concept. Yes, it is a Shia concept, but Sunni Islam uses it. The scholars use the term, right? But also, if you need to know, the term mudarat is the Sunni equivalent of taqiyya. They'll say taqiyya is Shia, fine, while mudarat is Sunni, because they're exactly the same thing. It's just a Sunni word for taqiyya. But they ended up using taqiyya anyway. Everyone uses it. Stephen Gilchrist says, appreciate what you're doing, very well presented and put together. Thank you. May Jesus Christ use you mightily and bless you abundantly. No, thank you. So yeah, lying is from darkness. Yes, it is correct. Now understand the major form of deceit. Forget taqiyya, ignore it. The major form of deceit in Islam is called hiyal. I have a video on that. Watch that. All of these are a subset of hiyal, and hiyal is a subset of rukhsa. Everything flows out of rukhsa. You can do anything you need as long as it benefits Islam, right? So let's continue here. So truces, remember, are permissible, but they are not obligatory. Right? So it is a matter of the gravest importance. Now understand this, and then I'll switch back to some notes again. The one who may affect a truce is the Muslim ruler of a region, fine. And they say that truces are permissible. You may do them, but they're not obligatory. They make a distinction. And it is a matter of the gravest consequence if you make a truce. Remember, a truce is a ceasefire. You're not killing, you're not fighting. It is a matter of the gravest consequence because it entails the non-performance of jihad. In other words, it's saying you got to think twice about this, because if you make a truce, it means you aren't killing and being killed in jihad. Understand the consequences of this statement, right? Jihad is the primary doctrine of Islam, but it's a subset of the doctrine of commanding the right and forbidding the wrong. Quran 3:104 is the most important verse in the Quran. Everything in Islam flows from that. So yeah, Islam is the religion of war, and that is a very accurate statement. That's a very good statement, yes. How about just using these techniques against them? Well, look, I mean, the truth is a really good weapon. If people knew this, I mean, why is this not being taught in seminaries? Why is this not being taught in church? Why is this not being taught? When I was doing counterterrorism at Leiden University, they threw me out of the course for showing this, for raising this, for discussing this. I was tossed out. They don't want the truth. Academia is turning out idiots, right? So Veronica, well, they must be aware of the truth since Muhammad broke. Well, yeah. Don't forget, remember, all truces, all oaths, all contracts, all promises can be broken. And the tool to do that is hiyal. Look in my channel for HIYAL. That's the granddaddy of all Islamic deception. It's called legal trickery, because remember, this section of Islam is the legal section. The theological section is the other section, the hakika, which I've spoken of earlier. Right. So let's continue. So if the Muslims are weak, a truce may be made for 10 years if necessary, and extended every 10 years for 10 years, right? However, it is not permissible to stipulate longer than that, save by means of new truces, each of which does not exceed 10 years. Understand that? Does that make sense? It is not permissible to stipulate longer, but, right, so there must be an interest served in making a truce other than mere preservation of the status quo. So there must be an interest. So in other words, if the truce serves the purpose of the Muslims and will get them an aim easier and better than making war would, then they can, as long as it benefits Islam in the same way that war would, without the hassle of war. Understand this. And this is covered in the Hedaya. Again, if you go into the Hedaya, volume 2, right, from page 145, and called the section called the Institutes, where they discuss the waging of war. And they explain exactly how you use truces, and the truce must benefit Islam in some way, give them a tactical and strategic advantage, else they are not to do it, and they should continue the war. So do not be faint-hearted and call for peace when it is you who are the uppermost. That's why tolerance is an evil, bad thing. tolerate them. Once they're on top, they will not tolerate you. Okay, I'm going to stop this for the moment. Let me see where I got in the... Okay, so I'm going to pause there for 1 minute before I go back, and I'm going to go back to... let me go to... Okay, so let me bring up... I'm just going to shift this over. Right. Do you guys have anything you want me to discuss in particular? Any questions? Please bring it up. I will stop in about 10 minutes. So, because we want to start talking about the basis for the Islamic Jihad and why the Crusades were a defensive response and a critical defensive response, a successful one, but don't forget, we lost 75% of Christendom in the process. Right? So Nicholas Paulson says, please elaborate on defensive or offensive jihad without a caliphate. I thought that lack of a caliphate had paused offensive jihad, and that was the reason bin Laden made such a long speech after 9/11. No, the jihad never stopped. The jihad can never stop. In the absence of a caliph, it is the individual Muslim that must pursue the jihad. So if you have a leader, if you have a senior imam, he will then make the necessary arrangements. So those who are following Fard Kifaya, he will recruit, he will find, he will look for people who are either eager themselves, or he will start to recruit people. And the rest will support through financial and other means. They will support. And if there is no leader, then you as a Muslim, it is obligatory upon you to pursue this yourself. You can make that decision in the absence of a caliph. Of course, there are rules to this. Now, if you go through the doctrine of commanding the right and forbidding the wrong, it explains how you calculate when and how you do this. So if there's going to be consequences, and for instance, if you are going to take an action to kill, like you're going to go on London Bridge and murder 5 people. However, you are armed with a banana and a rubber knife, and you're not going to be successful because you're 3 foot 2 inches tall and have only 1 arm and 1 leg. Well, then don't do it, because you are going to embarrass Islam and you're going to fail in your mission. But if you're a big strapping lad with an AK-47 and a bunch of knives, well, go ahead and do it, because you will successfully strike terror into the hearts of people and before you are shot. And in fact, they want to be killed, because then they will earn the highest reward from Allah, because jihad is the highest form of devotion in Islam. There's no higher form of devotion in Islam than jihad, which is dying and killing for Allah. So Dragana, can't block all Abduls all the time. Nature will never change. Yeah. And look, we need to educate our own people, and we need to educate our politicians. We need to educate our academics. We need to educate our theologians. It's very, very important. As a culture, we need to expose this and say, look, we don't want this. We need to ask Muslims, excuse me, this is your Sharia, this is your law. Start talking to me about it. They need to own this. Bin Laden's a CIA tool. You know, on that point, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the Russians are not your friends. As you know, as a Pole, you'll know the Russians are definitely not your friends, and no Pole considers the Russians their friends today even, right? At the time, the Russians were very bad people, the communists, and they were trying to take over the world, and they were invading areas like the Middle East and Afghanistan and all over the place. And of course, the Mujahideen were fighting against communism, and America was fighting against communism. They had a common enemy, so America trained them. America didn't train bin Laden to become a jihadi and kill Americans. They trained him, armed him to fight Russians and prevent communism from spreading. Because if communism had spread, many of you would be dead now, right? So this whole story, this is partial information. This is lies told by liars. He was trained, and of course he used the training, he used the money, he used the equipment, because suddenly you go from poverty to having, hey, I've got all this high-tech weaponry and a bunch of money, I can now pursue my jihad. Saudi Arabia was a little patch of sand with some goats, and Islam was going nowhere, right? And then of course suddenly there was discovered to be floating on piles of oil, and hey, the jihad started back in the 60s again, because Saudi Arabia was suddenly rich from oil money. It's purely through American investment, or shall we say Western ignorance and Western investment in finance, that they've been able to rise up again. But Islam was done and over with by the late 20s. Islam was done. Unfortunately, that oil wealth brought them back. So Yeah, how can one educate anybody when the motive is money? Like the saying, look, information, dude. This is information warfare. You've lost information war. That's called information dominance, right? You need to get the facts out there. This because it's a moral war. It's a war of perspectives. It's a war of narratives. And unfortunately, like the slavery issue, you want to know who were the biggest slavers? Well, black people were the biggest slavers in history, right? Not whites, blacks. Who ended slavery? Whites. Who still practices slavery? Blacks. Is it, you're not allowed to say that. Not no way on it, but hey, look, I'm black, so you tell me I'm from Africa, you know? So yeah, Hillslide, hey there. I just came in. What book? So, okay, so the one I'm looking at, so there are multiple books. The Hedaya, right, which is the commentary on Islamic law, which is from the Hanafi school. The Reliance of the Traveler, or the Umdat al-Salik, from the Shafi school. Those are the two main ones I use, right? Now, let me quickly go through this one. Now, notice he speaks of principles here, right? And of course, this is the Fiqh was Sunnah, the Fiqh was Sunnah by Imam Buti, or Sheikh Buti. First and foremost, the principles included first and foremost jihad, or struggle for the sake of Islam by all possible means. He means violence. And defense, if need be. In every case, defensive action is always secondary, if mentioned at all. Jihad is always violent, offensive warfare. Um, so Bam Bamster, thank you very much. Just discovered your great channel. Greetings from a South American in Australia. Wow, I'm a South African in Poland. Hey man, welcome. Thank you guys. Okay, so let me continue here. Let me just go through this. Now, this is from Sheikh Buti's book, The Jurisprudence of the Prophetic Biography. If we should ask why okay, this will explain why Muslims, this tries to explain to Muslims why they do jihad, why they did what they did, and why the Crusades were a response to this, right? Dragona says, you deserve much more subscribers. There's lots of knowledge behind it. Should be appreciated. Well, thank you. Yeah, look, tell people, look, go on David Wood's channel, go on whoever's channel. I mean, seriously, tell them, hey, talk to this guy, go speak to this guy, watch his videos, get him on your channel, invite him onto your channel. Do that, please. Just speak to people, tell people about this, share this, talk about it. I provide you with every resource that I use. I don't make it up. I show you on the screen, and I give you the books. These are authoritative books. These are not some random thing that I read somewhere. These are the books that the imams use, that the sheikhs use. Right? These are the final definitions. These are the ultimate source of reliability. Thank you, Steffi. So now on this, so let's define why they do jihad, and then I'll call it tonight. If we should ask why the legitimization of struggle by force was delayed until this stage, we find the answer in the following considerations. It is only fitting that armed struggle should be preceded by a reasoned explanation of Islam with a call to embrace it, a presentation of the arguments in its favor, and attempts to solve any problems which might prevent its being properly understood. These are the initial stages of jihad, and it is the joint responsibility of all Muslims, not just one or two, all, to participate in them. 14 different kinds of jihad. One of them is killing. That's the main one. However, what are the other 13 doing? Ask yourself. It was an expression of Allah's mercy towards his servants that he did not enjoin or force upon them the duty of armed struggle until they had come to have an abode of peace to serve, which is the lands of Islam, the house of Islam, the Dar al-Islam, to serve as a stronghold to which they could return for refuge and protection. The city of Medina was the first such place of refuge in Islam. So when they make an Islamic enclave in a city, like say Paris, they make an enclave called a Rabat, right? That's what they do. That's where they can return to. For instance, after the Bataclan, the people who killed those people, who massacred them, were in Molenbeek. That was their Rabat that they went to, and the people protected them, didn't tell the police about them. And I can get into detail on that as to why the rules are very explicit. So went to the next live. So give me a second. Let me finish this and I will catch up with the comments. From this point, our study will lead us into a discussion of jihad and armed conflict to present a sound understanding of jihad, its legitimacy, and the stages through which it passes. Since of all the foundations of Islam, this is the one which most alarms us, the kafir. We shall clarify first the meaning of jihad, its aim in Islam, the stages through which it passed in its development, and finally the stage at which its development reached completion. Then we will talk about the misconceptions, blah, blah, blah. I'll link to this book and you can download this and read it for yourself. And so permission was given to fight against anyone who stood in the way of the establishment of an Islamic society. Are you standing in the way of an Islam? Well, you must be fought. This is the law. This is the Sharia. These words are directly taken from the law. If you read the Hedaya, it is explicit, disgustingly explicit. So in dealing with atheists, idol worshippers, or polytheists, that's you, because you worship three gods, nothing was to be accepted from them but submission to Islam, due to the impossibility of harmony between atheism or paganism and a sound Islamic society. As for the people of the book, that is, Christians and Jews, it was sufficient for them to live in accordance with the laws of the Islamic society as a dhimmi, and to submit to the rule of the Islamic State, it's in the name, ISIS, as well as pay a poll tax referred to as the jizya instead of the zakah required of Muslims. Now, a poll tax is a head tax, and of course, and oddly enough, it's also termed, or the original term is capitation tax. And if you don't pay it, it's a decapitation tax. The last mentioned stage of development represents the Islamic ruling on jihad, which has remained valid until this day. So someone asked me earlier, is the jihad still valid? Yes, it is. I think it's Peter that asked me. Yes, the Islamic ruling on jihad remains valid until this day, and it remains incumbent upon Muslims in all ages, not of all ages, but in all ages, provided that they have the necessary power and arms. Well, the Osama bin Ladens of this world got power and arms, and off they went, right? Concerning the stage, God Almighty says, or Allah says, Allah all evil says, O you who believe, fight those of the disbelievers who are close to you and let them find harshness in you. And know that Allah is with those who are pious. So killing and fighting in jihad is being pious. Quran 9, 123. Similarly, Muhammad said, I've been commanded to wage war on people until they say there's no God but Allah. Let me scroll over and finish this section. Hence, it is meaningless in speaking of jihad to distinguish between defensive war and offensive war. So this question did come up, so let's do this then. For the aim of jihad is neither defense for its own sake nor offense for its own sake. Rather, its aim is to meet the need for the establishment of an Islamic society with all of its associated systems and principles. Once this aim has been achieved, it makes no difference whether it came about by means of defense or offense. As for legitimate defensive combat, such as a Muslim's defense of his wealth, his honor, his land, or his life, this is another type of warfare which has nothing to do with jihad, as it is spoken of in Islamic jurisprudence. This type of combat is referred to as qital al-sa'il, that is, warfare against an assailant, and scholars of jurisprudence devote a separate section to it in their writings. Nevertheless, untold numbers of writers confuse it with the jihad which we are discussing. According to the first theory, Islam was spread solely by the sword, as it were, and the Prophet and his companions employed coercion, such that the Islamic conquest took place at their hands was based on subjugation and tyranny, rather than inward conviction and thought. As for the second theory, it makes the very opposite claim. Now he's talking about people that, Muslims that want to say, well, jihad is like this, and then Muslims claim jihad is like that. And he's trying to clarify this. As for the second theory, it makes the very opposite claim, namely that Islam is a religion of peace and love in which armed struggle would never be given legitimacy except for the repulsion of unannounced aggression. And he basically says, no, that's nonsense. And that Muslims would never go to war unless they were forced to do so because some other party initiated hostilities. And this is false. Okay? So, and he says here, so we'll bring forth one piece of evidence after another to demonstrate that Islam is indeed a peaceable. So these are Muslims that are trying to pretend and trying to convince themselves and others that Islam is a peaceable, conciliatory religion which has no reason to interfere in others' affairs unless they assault it on its own turf, rousing it from its tranquil repose. Okay? And the aim of both of these groups seek to achieve by means of various carefully studied premises and tactics is to erase the notion of jihad from the minds of all Muslims. And he's saying that the idea to try and make this peaceful is to try to take jihad away from Muslims and therefore sap the power from Islam. They seek to promote the belief that jihad has been abrogated. And he says these people have no faith. But when a precise revelation concerning war has been sent down, you see in whose hearts is disease, hypocrisy, looking at you with the look of one overcome by death. In other words, these people are weak, they are cowardly, and they are doing Islam completely wrong. Another point that must be noted on this is a point of Islamic doctrine, which is that they'll tell you the Prophet never lied except in three things. One of those was, of course, a man lying to his wife. Two, for some other blah blah reason, and 3 for keeping the peace. Now, don't forget, when they want to not have conflict, not have a negative situation, they will lie to you to keep the peace. And when you lie to a kafir and as a Muslim to keep the peace, it is not considered lying. Understand, this is the exegesis of that Quranic verse or hadith that says that the Prophet only told a lie in 3 things. One of those was to keep the peace. And if you are keeping the peace, preventing conflict, preventing shouting or whatever, right, as in interfaith dialogue, that nonsense, then you're not lying. And also, another thing of doctrine, Islamic doctrine, called niyat. Action is judged by intention. If you intend good but you do evil, then Allah judges the intention, not the act. You can kill all the babies you want, but if you did it to promote Allah and kill his enemies, and dude, well done. Allah gives you a big hand for that. Understand, the action is judged by the intention, not the outcome. The ends justify the means. Like, I hope that makes sense. I'll end here. Without lies, Islam dies. Yes, let's go through this. Uh, Podsjewitka, yeah, that sounds Polish. How high was jizya? Jizya was roughly 50% of your salary. Look, it depended. It might be reduced. There was a lower limit, but there was no upper limit. So they could take 99% of your income. So this is from Musto asking me. There was no upper limit assigned to the jizya. There's a lower limit. There was a lower limit, right? So you had to pay, like, I think 10 dinars a year or something. So it depends. It's in the books, right? I've done shows on this with Thaddeus. It's also on my channel. Look up jizya on my channel. I go into this in extreme detail. The laws here are details, like 50 or 60 pages of law I go through. So, but there's no upper limit. And in fact, if you're not aware that you can negotiate, then they can take everything from you if you're too stupid to know that you can negotiate. But of course, if you can't pay, then they can take your children as slaves. They can take your wife as a slave if you could not pay the jizya. This was allowed. Ask truth, hey man. AT. When's the next live? So that was the question. Did I miss any? Guys, if you need me to answer a question specifically, at my name, so at Lloyd, and then so I can see it because I might miss your questions. I do try to answer all the questions. So yeah, Steffi, did you have any questions? Because I see you seemed a little shocked there about this. Jihad is never abrogated. That is the truth. In India, 30 or 50% of them, yeah, India suffered 50%. So the typical law is 50% of your income, and there's a minimum limit. But yeah, do as thou wilt. Yes, correct, and the lies will. 50%, this is bankruptcy. Exactly. It's intended to bankrupt. It's intended to weaken you. And don't forget, when Islam no longer had people to bankrupt, Islam itself went bankrupt and fell into weakness. The old man of Europe, the sick man of Europe, Turkey, died. What do you negotiate with? You can't pay. I guess you hope for the best. Yeah, hope. Yeah, it's demonic. Yes, it is. And then Nicholas says, give the material you presented. How does the Muslim Brotherhood motivate the at least superficial commitment to non-violence in the attempt? Because they're lying, just flat out lying. At least superficial commitment to non-violence, because they come on, they're responsible for assassinations. The Muslim Brotherhood has spawned dozens of Islamic jihad organizations, dozens of Islamic terror groups. They are the original. They had a special wet work division. Understand? They had a special operations division, for wet work. So understand, they are the template for what happened with the sudden eruption of 200-300 different Islamic terror organizations. They are the granddaddy of all of this. Steffi, I've never heard it all laid out this way. I've never heard the information you're reading today. Yes, there's so much more. Man, I can go for days on this. Yes, this is my frustration, my issue with Islamic apologists, with seminarians, with academics. They don't go beyond the Quran, which is a waste of time. Seriously, the Quran is a waste of time. We do exegesis as if Muslim scholars have never done it, as if they've never had 1400 years to write it down and explain it. If you throw away the Quran, I promise you go to the Sharia, you read the scholarly text, they will tell you when a verse becomes relevant. They'll quote it and they'll explain it in detail. And then they'll tell you when a hadith is relevant and they'll quote it and explain it in detail. They'll go for pages. One verse in the Quran can literally be 10 pages of doctrine, of detailed regulation, detailed law. And you'll never find this in the Quran. Never. It's nowhere to be seen there. Understand? We need to go to the Sharia. You need to go to the Fiqh. And unfortunately, that itself is a maze. It's taken me years to figure it out. I mean, good grief. Just like the credit economy, when the interest bubble stops, it crashes. Yes, dude, you're very educated about this. I learn a lot from you as well. Yeah, guys, I learn a great deal from my audience as well. I don't know everything. So I learn a lot from people who teach me things as well. And it fills in gaps. Like a piece of the puzzle suddenly appears. So, guys, I'm going to call it in a few minutes. Yeah, so Peter says some authors have speculated that the mafia protection tax. So Mafi actually derives from an Islamic term because don't forget the Muslims were in Sicily for what 300 years, and so the mafia actually do have there. Let's say there's evidence for. I wouldn't say the word proof, but there's strong evidence for that the mafia comes from the Arabic term mafi, which is the extortion that the Muslims were living. So yes, there is certainly a connection, a historical connection. Um, and Medic says, I'm not going to say your name, dude. It'll be nice to talk a bit about Albana in one of the coming. Yes. Look, I have extensive notes. Don't forget, I don't read everything all the time. I've done notes sometimes 2, 3 years ago. I wrote these. I'm a little OCD when it comes to taking notes, as you guys will notice. Um, so yeah, I can certainly talk about them. I've actually written a document about them and their method of ideological warfare. I wrote a document for an organization um, on a consulting basis, I guess, on their ideological warfare methods. That would be an interesting discussion. So look, it's just I have so many ideas. I've literally dozens, and I'm not kidding. I have dozens of presentations I could do, and I'm trying to find when to do all of them. Also, by the way, I've received some very good emails from some people, from a couple of you guys, and I will do a show to address those questions. So I have made a note of the questions I've received, some long comments or some emails. I am preparing presentations to deal with those questions to make a show on the questions that I've gotten. So I will attend to that. Understand? So thank you for that. Just give me time because I only have so much time to do these. Western scholars have picnics where Islamic scholars fear to. I hope so, dude. I hope so. But Western scholars are blind in many ways. And is it that because they keep changing the look? The interpretation is fixed. Believe me. There's no confusion. There's no confusion. There's a lot less than you realize. It's just that Muslims are ignorant, and also Muslims. Look, you're a kafir. You're not supposed to know their secrets. It's illegal for you to know their secrets, and they may not reveal their secrets to you. So they have to lie to you. It's obligatory to lie to you. Understand? I've looked into these claims like a lot of brothers here. Lloyd is correct. Islam is a cult and not compatible with any other ideologies of Western way. Yes. And Daffodap Rees, God bless the work you do from Australia. Thank you. And the same to you from Poland, by way of South Africa. I'll have to watch this from the beginning. Hillside, please do. Thank you. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Um, let me. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. So, for instance, let me go here. I'm going to show you guys something. This is my Christianity database. It's not huge. Okay, so these are my notes on Christianity. Oh, sorry, hold on. Let me go back here. These are my notes on Christianity. These are my Christianity. This is my Christian database, right? My notes. You can see each page here. This is Christianity invented by Paul as I go through this, right? So this is the kind of notes that I prepare. I've been writing for years, for years. I have hundreds of pages of notes, detailed notes, right? That's on Paul, right? Now you can go, now these are additional notes, additional notes, additional notes, additional notes, additional notes, lies about the Bible. There's so many talks I want to do. The Vatican Council and the statement on Islam. That's the Vatican II statement on Islam, which is so much bogus claptrap. Yeah, I've got tons and tons and okay, now the Crusades, for instance, my talks on the Crusades, I've got several pages on that. Now let's have a look at Judaism. So these are my notes on Judaism. You can see this on the side here. These are my notes on Judaism. I have detailed notes on Judaism. Now let's look at Islam. Have a look at the number of pages I've got discussing Islam, right? And this is just my notes on the word deen. What does the word deen mean? You can see here, these are my notes on the meaning of the word deen. This is fairly detailed. I've been taking notes. Now have a look. I'm going to go here to my section on jihad. This is my section on jihad. You can see I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know, 20 sections. And these are my notes. Now, this is my main page on jihad. This is every reference to jihad known to man. Okay, this is, so I can find just about anything in a flash. No matter what someone tells me, I have it somewhere. I will find it and I'll be able to provide contrary evidence. So understand, these are my notes. I mean, and I have like 20 more pages like this, just on jihad alone. So I have made a portion of this available to you in the OneDrive link. So have a look at that. Dragona says the all the time, al-kafirun, and not to tell that surah abrogated with surah 9. Yes, it's all abrogated, so Islam is too much to talk about. Yes, it does. Yeah, guys, so look, I need to call it, but look, I've made a portion of my database available. Please, it's in the description. Look at it. I've made many of these books available. I will make the Fiqh Sunnah available. I'll give you the links to download them. I will try and provide my own copy with my own annotations, notes, and so on in them. I've got many bookmarks and other things in them. And read them, look through them, try to understand what I'm talking about from using the sources. Go back and use it as an educational resource. Yeah, I know. Whenever I talk about the Sharia, they suddenly no longer believe in the Sharia, but they want to impose the Sharia on the world. It's stupid. Topic suggestion: lies atheists usually tell about the church and Galileo. Oh yeah, thank you. You are very welcome. Yeah, I'm actually right now on my tablet. I'm busy doing some work on that exact topic on atheism and atheists. It's a joke. It's stupid. I mean, seriously, that's another form of stupid. Um, yeah. So yeah, it's anyway. But guys, thank you very much for your time, and please share this information. Go on other channels, talk to people. Please, guys, give me a like at the very least. I put a lot of time and effort in. I finished work at 7 and I haven't had dinner yet. I'm going to stop now and go eat. Um, give it a like, give it a share. Please tell people, but also go on other channels if you want if you want this message to spread. Go on other channels, tell people about the work that I do. Ask them to invite me on. I'll be happy to do that. Okay, and yeah, I do take all the suggestions. No, thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you, guys. I am going to do another live show, I believe, on Sunday. I'm not sure if I'll do one this week. I'm busy doing a lot of research. I'm doing 3 or 4 different presentations right now. I'm busy writing. And next week, I will have Shamoun Kakan. We will be talking about Muhammad's marriage to Aisha and the implications of that, of course. And yes, in the Sharia, you will find references to prepubescent sex. You will find references to prepubescent marriage, divorce, as well as marriage with infants. Infants. Okay, and we will talk about this. We're going to lay it bare next week on Thursday on this channel at 8 p.m. next Thursday. And yeah, Muslims need to own their religion. They need to own this. This is the truth about Islam. These are the facts. Um, yeah, as you said on atheist, look, I mean, dude, yeah, I'm happy to have you here. Thank you, Edkin. I mean, yeah, look, I mean, it's what it is. I'm not an evangelistic Christian. I don't try and force my beliefs, but I mean, I did work in national security. I try not to have people kill people, and this is why they kill people, because of their beliefs. So yeah, guys, thank you very much. I will call it here. Really good to spend time with you, and we shall see you next time, right? Just and I'll catch you guys in the chat. Drop a comment, let me know, and I will see you next time. Okay, take care. Bye.